Thank you. Good morning, members, officers, members of the public joining us today. Welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Committee. My name is Councillor Annika Osborne and I will be chairing this committee meeting today. Item 1 on our agenda today is apologies. Sarah, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, I believe there's no apologies directly, but Councillor Sally Ann Hart is online and Councillor Howell said he might be late.
Thank you very much. In relation to the agenda, do members have any interests to declare in relation to any of the items of business on this agenda? No, everyone's fine. If an interest does subsequently become apparent later in the meeting, please do raise it at that point and we can go from there. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, item 3, is minutes of the previous meeting. This was the meeting on the 19th of October, 18th of September, which are attached to the agenda. Does anyone have any comments? I've got one typo at one of the paragraphs. It's labelled as first aid kids, not first aid kits. I think it's page 9. Page 5, sorry. Sunita. Councillor Hanraj, sorry, could you? Were yours the same? Okay. Lovely, that was the same comment there from Councillor Hanraj. Councillor Bradnam?
Thank you. I just wanted to check if under the officers listed there, whether locum litigation lawyer is the right terminology. I wondered if Felicity could confirm that.
Thank you, Councillor Braddon. No, we'll have that changed.
I don't know. To what,
Thank you.
Felicity?
Sarah, so it's consistent with the other ones.
Exactly. Thank you. It didn't look the same as we've had in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
It was just a typo, so I put my hand down.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. So, subject to those two amendments, is everyone happy to approve the minutes?
Agreed.
Yep, agreed. Thank you very much. We can approve those.
I wasn't here, so should I abstain? Yeah. Okay. I just want to abstain as I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. So the next item on the agenda is public questions. I believe no public questions were submitted, so there's no further matter on this one. And then item 5, review of the street trading policy. So agenda item 5 asks the committee to recommend to the lead cabinet member for the environment that officers consult on the introduction of a new ice cream trader consent within the council's street trading policy. Some amendments that Councillor Bradnam have suggested have been handed out for members for the discussion moving forward. And Rachel Jackson, if you could present on this item, if I can hand over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As per the agenda, you'll see a range of proposed revisions to the existing street trader policy. This follows my review of how the scheme is working and to bring in improved and more efficient amendments. Some of these relate to issues we've experienced with the complaints from ice cream traders, from themselves, from illegal or unlicensed ice cream traders, and from concerns from parish councils as well. So it's basically to bring a streamlined, more efficient and effective street trading regime insofar as ice cream traders is concerned. Obviously, as the Chair has just mentioned, a couple of revisions, proposed revisions as suggested by Councillor Bradnam have been circulated for your consideration. Obviously, there's no issues or concerns from an officer's point of view with what has been proposed. Some members are obviously asked to consider those revisions as well, Chair. If the committee agree, this will require approval by the Cabinet Lead, after which we'll then begin the consultation. So the consultation will then bring any comments we receive from the parish, existing traders and other interested parties that will enable me to formulate a revised street trading policy, which your committee, Chair, will ultimately review and have the final say in the new year. So if there are no other questions, Chair, that concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can open then for discussion.
Councillor Hales.
Councillor Hales, would you like to go?
Thank you, Chair. I've been reading through the points and the tweaks and what have you, which I find fabulous, Councillor Braden, thank you. This is a comment down to experience, actually. having my grandson living with us for the last few days, we haven't had an ice cream van come down our road, but since he goes to bed at around about 7 o'clock, and they take a little while to go off, I'd forgotten this, it was 40 years ago since I did it last. However, I just wonder whether or not bringing that time of the last time you can ring your bell on your ice cream van forward a little bit, perhaps to 6 o'clock, but then moving the 12 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So you still got the same amount of time. You know, I like an ice cream at 11 o'clock in the morning, that's not a problem. But I'd rather not have a 2-year-old awake at 7, since I now know what that feels like. Or should I say reminded? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Wilson?
I'm looking at the 7th bullet, which says the chimes should not be played more often than once every 2 hours in a particular length of street. But we have the other condition that they can't trade for more than 15 minutes and that they can't come back within 24 hours. So I've been trying to work out what this 2 hours applies to if they have to move on within 15 minutes. So that there's a bit of an ambiguity there.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I believe Rachel Jackson had some information on the policy that backs behind this with noise pollution, so I can ask her for that question.
Thank you very much, Chair. If we can just go back to Councillor Wilson first of all, and I've obviously got Councillor Hales's comments in my head. These weird and wonderful comments and points aren't something I've actually dreamt up. These are actually part of the code of practice on noise from ice cream van chimes. But you're absolutely right. That's just a standard regulation, should we say, Councillor Wilson. So if the members are happy, I think we should remove that, because you're absolutely right. It's not relevant because the trader should not be there at any one time. That is more relating to if we have a council, well, it's like a district council which only has the designated streets, that trader can go along. So that would be absolutely right and proper. But for us, with the proposals where the trader should only be there for 15 minutes, you're absolutely right. We can delete that if the chair and the committee agree. Because that trader would not be there for, so the trader would only be there for 15 minutes, so they wouldn't be sounding their chimes for 2 hours, because they wouldn't be there for 2 hours. That's point 7.
The one that refers to 2 hours is number 7.
Yes, yeah, good. So the committee are happy to remove that. And going to Councillor Hales's comment with regard to the 7:30. 7:30 is the actual code of practice, the kind of standard permitted hours. When I provided the draft proposals, this did go through my colleague in environmental health, who's our lead officer for noise nuisance, noise prevention, and he considered that these timings were appropriate. Of course, you can say 7 o'clock, because it's a street trading policy, it's your policy. It's just to tie in with the national kind of guidance and what is expected nationally. But I say, ultimately, you are the decision makers, and chair, if you decide that 7 o'clock is more reasonable, clearly, of course, I can go for consultation. But I say that is the kind of the standard hours.
6 o'clock.
That'd be 6 o'clock. Councillor Hales was proposing 11 till 6.
Oh, so, I think that would be very, I don't want to say unreasonable as an officer, but I feel with the current people trading in the evening, the ice cream vans in the summer nights, going to 6:30, 7 o'clock, when in other districts you can quite freely trade till 7:30, may be a bit tight. However, it's all subject to consultation on what you consider and agree today, Chair, to be honest with you. But I say 12 till 7:30 has been a kind of standard, shall we say, from there.
Thank you, Rachel Jackson. Councillor Bradnan.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Rachel, for the paper. You will appreciate I've spent quite a lot of time going through it and produced this proposal or suggestions. It was just suggestions for us to discuss, because some of the, if we did publish this, we would be publishing something which has 14 conditions for an ice cream vendor to comply with. And I think it's far too many conditions, and I think we need to simplify it if we can in the most, in the way that's easiest to understand. And so there are some, as I've said, that seem to conflict with each other, and I've suggested amalgamations and deletions. I agree with the suggestion to remove 7. And also, I just wanted us to sort of put ourselves in the shoes of a responsible ice cream vendor who perhaps arrives at the one end of a very long street. So, as far as I understand it, they are allowed to approach the site where they plan to park, and they can play their chimes for 12 seconds on approach. Then they park, set themselves up, and they can play their chimes for 12 seconds. Then they wait and they trade. And then, as far as I'm aware, they are entitled currently to move off, and somebody hails them from the garden gate further down the road, so they can go to that general area, and providing it's not too close, I think they would be mindful of that, they can stop again on the other end of that street, or partway through. If you're on Cottenham High Street, you know, you'd think you might want to do 4 stops along there, I don't know. But it depends how long the street is, how residential it is, but it's partly down to the responsibility of the driver. So let's assume he then goes to the other end of the street, plays his chimes for 12 seconds on approach, stops, gets himself ready, plays his chimes for 12 seconds, or her chimes, and then sells ice cream. So I don't know completely about this, but my understanding is that the way that an ice cream vendor operates, an ice cream van operates, is to respond to a degree to people asking them to stop. They choose a safe place and a reasonable place to stop, and obviously what this is all about is not driving the neighbours nuts with your chimes being too frequent, too loud, too insistent, or too close together. So this seems to be a reasonable approach, but I think we need to simplify it. So I've gone through each of these. I actually had to draw myself a little map to say, how would you do this, and would it involve them? You know? So I think I'm suggesting that there's bullet 13, which originally referred to the ending time. I would prefer that no trading after 7:30 came at the end. So it just says, the loudspeaker chimes to be operated only between the hours of 12 and 7, and no trading after 7:30. So it's sequential in time. And then the others I agreed, but I still think maybe we need to look at some simplifications. The gist of what's going on in 6 I agree with, but I've suggested we try to avoid the conflicts that there are. So I've suggested the wording on the right-hand side, which incorporates the necessity to let, it's only as often as is necessary to let the customers know that the commodity is on sale from the vehicle. That is, chimes should not last more than 12 seconds and be played once only on the approach to each stopping place, only once when the van is stationary, and never at intervals of less than 2 minutes. That seems fine, but then we can delete 10 because that kind of conflicts with it. Others have suggested deleting 7. 8 seems fine. We've said we'll delete 9. And then, no, it's delete 10, sorry. That was the amendment I made orally before we started the meeting. That 6 gets rid of the unnecessary 10. And I've used the wording in 9 in 6. So 9 and 10 could go. And I perfectly agree that chimes should not be played within 50 metres of schools, and separately, not without their explicit permission, and all these other places. So many of these things I think are fine, but I think we can just simplify it and reduce it down. I didn't then, unfortunately, have time to do a summary which would show the resolved answers, because I felt it was for discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
I have got another comment on
Can I just go back to
on the
Councillor...
highways
can I
issue,
just-
which I'll come back
Sorry,
to at a later point.
Excuse me, Councillor Bradley, can I just go back on this
Yes,
one,
I said I would come
on the
back
noise
later.
policy? We'll come back on the highways as a separate issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Bradley. I think looking at this again, I would not see, I thought there was a dog in the room there or something. I would not envisage any problem with removing point 10, because point 10 is pretty much, it is the same about the 2 minutes. But I say, I just want to point out that again, this whole schedule was actually signed off by my noise colleagues, and ultimately they are the ones that, if we get a complaint about noise nuisance, they'll be the ones enforcing any breaches of the policy. To say there's a lot of conditions, I mean, I might be a bit biased in my regulatory hat on, but I think we've got about 20-something standard conditions, 23 conditions for standard consent. So I don't feel this is unreasonable to capture all the chimes best practice requirements on there, because it shows, I think we're being very transparent there by having a range of maybe 8 or whatever we've got now, special conditions relating to street trading for ice cream traders. I think it is right. Experienced people, as Councillor Hales has said, if we had an ice cream trader who was allowed to do what he wants and have chimes blaring out constantly for 2 hours, for example, it's not going to bode well for our local residents, quite frankly. So I do feel these are not onerous, I don't believe, and they have been approved by, say, my powers that be who are responsible for the noise nuisance. So I feel that the 6 or 8 conditions here would be reasonable, Chair.
Can I just come back on, while we're talking about the noise and the chimes, on Councillor Hales's point about the times that he's proposed from 11 till 6. Obviously, Rachel Jackson has come back about why, and I just wondered if that's something that the members wanted to amend, or whether we're happy to leave it at 12 till 7. Does anyone wish to change it to 11 to 6? I'll go back to Councillor Hales first and then Councillor.
I'm happy to go with what everybody says. Now, obviously, if there's national policies and guidelines, then my comment was more really for grandparents unite. That's really.
Thank you. Councillor Hansrath.
I support what Councillor Hales is saying, simply from looking at the fact that I don't think children should be encouraged to eat ice cream before they go to bed. It's, we have a responsibility towards primary health and bringing up our children healthy. Thank you.
Okay. Is your point in reference to something that we're discussing at the moment? It was Councillor Howells, if I can go back to him first. Councillor Howells.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, I think I hold the distinction of being the last councillor who supported the licensing team to take somebody, an ice cream van, to court for unfair trading and not having the correct licensing. So I hold that particular honour, if there is such a one. I just want to ask a couple of questions, and forgive me if they've already been answered. I was sorting out other things. It says here on the page 10 of it, chimes should not be played more than once every 2 hours in a particular length of street. Now, I can understand that in Patworth, where we have Short Street, the name might give it away about the length of that street. But Ermine Street, which is one of the longest streets in the country, goes the whole length of Patworth. So that is something I'd just like a little bit more clarification on, please, if you wouldn't mind. And also, at the very bottom on page 10 of the bullet points, no trading by the consenting company to any location for more than 15 minutes. Again, we have a play park where basically the ice cream man sits there for the next 3 hours and he is the refreshments for that play park. And he's on the highway, he's not on private land. And again, that seems to work very well in the village, but I would just like a bit of clarification on how something like that would work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Rachel Jackson, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Howes. We go to the play park if the trader is obviously, if it's on private land, not parish land. I'm assuming he's on private land, on the highway. So that would be a standard consent in any case. These are very much not the ones that are here for 4 hours, which can trade there quite lawfully. They'd be still subject to the standard consent. the mobile consent. This is exclusively for this revision for the ice cream traders who are there doing the typical ice cream van routes. We've got about 5 or 6 of these now coming around and want to be in our district trading. They are there for literally 2 minutes at a time, moving along, and I think it's obviously as Councillor Wilson and Councillor Bradham said, you might have a long street, like my street, if they're there, they will stop a few more metres down the road, but the thing is they are not causing an obstruction or a nuisance immediately outside somebody's house by parking there for half an hour, 2 hours, and that is a real issue we've had. People parking outside, say, a school, for example, and then the fumes going into somebody's garden. This is what they don't want, whereas if it's there for a couple of minutes, moving on, most people are reasonable and acceptable to that, so we say, interference or disturbance.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Bhattacharya, then I'll come to Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Bhattacharya. It's all right, we'll just wait for your microphone, don't worry, no rush.
Thank you very much. As I said, ice cream is a nice topic to discuss. Page number 9 and bullet 1. Does it mean that they have to take the additional paper? They have to do the additional paperwork, or they have to pay money to the town council and parish council? The permission. When we say the permission, does it mean they have to pay money to town council, or is it just an additional paperwork? That's my first question. And bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4. When we say the loudspeaker, how do you measure the loudspeaker? What is a decibel? Like, how do you limit? What is your limit to give a permission? 40 decibel, 80 decibel. I do not see any exact number of the technically measurement decibel. Next is that.
If you could wait, carry on.
And then second is 12 seconds. There are a couple of things like 12 seconds, every 3 minutes, all this thing. How do you measure them? Because how can we monitor this thing, like particularly? How do we monitor that this is every 3 minutes or every 3 things, etc.? This is a given verdict that you have to follow that. But we do not have any monitoring support that we are saying, oh, this is happening exactly in the manner that I want. And in the month of July 7:30 p.m. and in the month of November 7:30 p.m. are very two different things. Sometimes Cambridge is the most dry and the hot and warm place in this country. Drought is happening. So maybe the summer is more longer in Cambridge than any other part of this country. Sometimes we may enjoy ice cream at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock because it is really hot some days, and so we can consider that on the really hot days in the summer holiday time, as maybe we can extend time because families are sitting around and particularly I said Cambridge is a different than rest of the country. We are not the same like Aberdeen or Leeds or Liverpool or any other place. We are really the warm place. And second and finally, my request is that due to living in a very high technology world today, we have lost a lot of beautiful things in life. So let us keep this as friendly, as community friendly as possible for our children to remember as a nice stories to remember. So that's why my saying. And one more thing, when you say the mileage, I know there is one point you have mentioned 30 meters or 50 meters or something. And that is also my first question, that how close of a school, half a mile, 1 mile, I got an answer, I think 50 meters, etc. So yeah, these are my couple of questions specifically on the monitoring things, but do not compress so much that our beautiful things will lose from the life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bhattacharya. Rachel Jackson, if I can go to you on her questions about the noise pollution enforcement and potential extended hours during the summer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. As just to repeat as well, these have all gone through our noise team, who are responsible for enforcing noise pollution, noise nuisance aspects. So the 50 metres, for example, was the reasonable approach to say 50 metres distance from noise-sensitive properties such as hospitals, places of worship, etc. The chime should not be louder than 80 decibels at 7.5 metres and not as loudly in quiet areas or narrow streets elsewhere. That is standard kind of practice recognised by environmental health officers. You did suggest an extension of hours to later on in the summer hours, but I'm quite mindful of complaints we get from residents near to pub beer gardens. The noise for some at 8 o'clock, just because it's sunny, doesn't mean somebody doesn't have to get up at 5 o'clock for their shift, for example. An accepted nuisance at 7:30 of an ice cream chime may not be quite as welcome at 9 o'clock at night. Admittedly, it's still dark at 10 o'clock. Still light rather at 10 o'clock, but I say it would be probably constituting a noise nuisance and public nuisance if we have chimes going on at 9, half 9. Thank you. So that's that part of it. And the parish councils, well, basically we have a very flexible, policy with regard to street trading currently, which does say any land which is owned or operated by a council, so that could be county, it could be South Cambs, it could be the parish council and town councils. So if you have a space of land outside a recreation ground that's owned by the parish council could accept and have that trader there, and they could charge, they could make it, the trader could pay a fee to the parish council. That's a matter for the parish council and the business alone. So that is nothing to do with this policy because it'd actually be exempt. But to say, should a parish council be able to obtain a fee to allow an ice cream trader to be in their location? I would say absolutely not. And also with regard to a payment of a fee, I don't see how that would be properly enforceable or even legal, to be quite honest with you. It's a bit like saying you've got a taxi driver which picks up in Fulbourn 6 times a week. Perhaps Fulbourn parish should have a commission for that. I don't see how it could possibly work, to be honest with you, Councillor. Was that all your questions?
Yeah,
sorry, have I caught everything?
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if Rachel would find it acceptable to do as I suggested in item 6, which was to amalgamate the wording from bullet 9, which says chimes should be played only as often as is necessary to let customers know the commodities on sale from the vehicle, and amalgamate that, as I suggested with 6, to say that is, chimes should not last more than 12 seconds and be played only once, because that explains how we are identifying what is reasonable as a way of describing that you're selling ice cream. So that wording on the right could just be bullet, the condition 6, and then we could get rid of item 9.
Thank you. Rachel Jackson.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely fine to amalgamate the two. So it's still keeping within the best practice guidance we have and having a standard approach, but it says exactly the same thing. So absolutely fine to merge, amalgamate 6 and 9 together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you. Just to clarify regarding Councillor Bhattacharya's question about parish councils, I know what happens in Papworth now. The ice cream vendor that Councillor Hull referred to just sent an email to the parish council saying, I want to trade in the village these days at these times, and it was agreed. I presume he got an email back. There was no form or any formality. So that is what happens now. The main points I wanted to raise was bullet 2 no trading to take place in the immediate vicinity of schools. The term immediate vicinity is very arbitrary and difficult to stand up in court, basically. Clause 11 refers to within 50 metres of school, which obviously is enforceable. I assume the licensing officers go out with a very long tape measure to check they're not within the zone of 50 metres of the school. So I'd like to see point 2 firmed up to actually give out maybe 50 metres or whatever is appropriate.
Would it be said?
Thank you. Richard Jackson, do you have any comment on that? I think I kind of agree that maybe the 50 metres could be mirrored.
Absolutely, yes. It is a standard to have, and it's a reasonable approach. I mean, then we could say, is it radius as a crow flies? But I don't think we need to be too pedantic, Councillor, with that. I would hope with the traders, because the general common sense approach would be, if we are in a close proximity, typically what I'm saying is close proximity to a school is, your school's in Ashby Grove, you want to trade on Ashby Grove, for example, it's within that. But if, say, to add the 50 metres within here would be...
50 metres by the nearest road or footpath is probably a logical approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
My comment relates to the same bullet, the immediate vicinity of schools. Later on we do have another reference to schools, and it's during school hours. And that first bullet feels a bit like a blanket provision, which, when thinking about my village of Cottenham, we have ice cream vans that stop on the village green, which is in the vicinity of the village college, and near the recreation ground, which is near the primary school. But this could happen at weekends, so I think we need to be a bit more specific about... I didn't understand that. A bit more specific about when that
this is not
particular condition will apply, so that it doesn't disallow ice cream vans from trading when children have come out of school or at weekends or in the evenings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Councillor, you've escalated now, crikey. I'm honoured now. You know that one.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to say during, when the school is open, of course, not to allow that. So obviously you can have the flexibility to be trading outside the school terms.
So we would put in times as opposed to during school hours. So
yes,
it's clearer.
We put in that, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when outside of we put in there during school hours. So obviously we could say, again, for the second point, no trading to take place in the immediate vicinity of schools within 50 metres during school hours.
Councillor Bannon, can you wait a moment?
So we'll just say during school hours, stroke term. Yeah.
Can I make a further suggestion that it's the key point, going back to being a parent, is actually when you're collecting young children, it's not... if it chimes whilst the school is all happening and they're behind the fence, it's kind of fine. And probably that ice cream vendor wouldn't go at that time anyway. But it's the sort of 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock pick-up time. I speak from painful experience, and I always said no, and it was hell. But yeah, okay.
I mean, obviously, sorry, Chair, I'm just going to say, it's your take on that one. We either just say during school hours or between the hours of 3 till 4 p.m. or term, whichever you wish. But ultimately, the final decision, this is all going to go to public consultation in any case. So your final types, comments, concerns, etc. will all be subject to your final say-so. But you may want to make a decision, Chair, on whether you specify, for Councillor Wilson's point, obviously Councillor Ripper there to say, during the hours of 3 till 4 p.m, during school term times, no X, Y, and Z, no trading there. You may wish to add that, or you may wish to keep it as...
In relation to that point specifically, does anyone have a comment in relation to the times point? So that's Councillor Bradman.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest some alternative wording for that bullet too. So, as we said, to mirror the other one, we could say, no trading to take place within 50 metres of schools unless express permission has been obtained by the school, or you could add in within 50 metres of schools, and then you could put a timing element in there, unless express permission has been obtained by the school. But you could say outside school hours, but you can define the time in that one. Because I think the point about the use of the word proximity is quite tricky. So what I've suggested is no trading, that number 2 should say no trading to take place within 50 metres of schools unless express permission has been obtained by the school. Fine, but if people want to add, Councillor Rippeth mentioned specific hours that you might want to exclude it, and that's fine. But I don't know whether the school would want to be involved with excluding trading when they are not open.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. In relation to the times, obviously Councillor Rippeth proposed, for example, 3 to 4. Do we think that's a reasonable thing to include at the moment for at least the consultation on this, to say that, as Councillor Bradnam proposed, trading doesn't take place within 50 metres of the school unless express permission has been obtained, and it doesn't take place between 3 and 4 in term times? Is that something we want to add in at the moment, just so we can have consultation on it from the traders? And then obviously when it comes back for policy, we can vary dependent on the consultation. If I can have Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm just thinking of just how things happen in life, and children come out of school, and in the primary school in Cottonwood is next to the recreation ground, and that's where the children go to play and socialise. And so if they're not allowed, if there's no access to the ice cream van, then the parents might want to buy their children an ice cream as a treat. I think by excluding particular hours, we are sort of seem to be taking away a little pleasure in life.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, I mean, that is the peak probably trading times as well, I would say, for the ice cream vans, when people come out of school, especially in the summer. So that's why I was asking whether somebody wants to propose it. Councillor Waters, you were going to say something.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say the same points as Councillor Wilson. I do think that time perhaps might be a little too long, and particularly in the summer. And all the places are different. We've all got different places where the children will access the ice cream van. So I think shorten the hours and see what the consultation comes back with, but I think we need to change that a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Waters.
Thank you.
Rachel Jackson, you had some comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just a comment on Councillor Wilson and the recreation ground trader. If they are on a recreation ground owned by the parish, they can do, with respect, whatever the parish says they can do. So that's no problem at all. This is only for these new traders. So if it's on parish land, your parish council own the recreation ground, then the trader can be there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to trade.
Councillor Wilson.
They could be on the street outside the access to the recreation ground. That's what I'm thinking. So that would be outside the school and outside on the street, not necessarily on the recreation ground itself.
That's fine. So then it would apply. So then the question is, they're still not saying, if they're trading there already, the school or the education establishment is happy with that, there would be no reason to accept that. The school would not say yes to that particular trader. So there shouldn't be any detriment to trading, but I think you probably are correct to just say during school hours, stroke term, would make more sense rather than keep to particular hours. Personally, but I say it's obviously your committee decision.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I was just wondering, when you're saying permission has been granted from the school, at that point I'm presuming the school can raise any concerns, if there are any, about specific hours?
Absolutely, yeah, that's right, Chair. What would happen is, a bit like we have a consented premises trader currently, they have a permission to go into, they apply to us, they do all the checks, we check with the police to make sure they are fit and proper, Then they're given basically a passport. They can then go to any consented premises and trade there. This will be the same notion here, apart from the ice cream trader, once they've got their permission, will then have to approach the parish to say, I've got my permission, here it is, I want to trade in your patch. Is that okay? Parish says, yes, but only here, here and here, or only between these hours, or no, sorry, we don't want you, we've got enough facilities here already. So ultimately, it's giving the parish councils greater control, actually.
Thank you. Councillor Bhattacharya, if you're coming back.
I have a technical question actually after listening to Peter in the paper. Now, Camborne Town Council has a trade form for the traders, and with a certain payment and filling up the form, they are given the permission to come and run their business in Camborne. And most of the day, I mean, you can see in the cricket pavilion is full of the food vans, etc. So I know this bit. Now in Camborne, most of the roads are not yet transferred to town council. They are not town council, are not responsible for those roads and everything. And the ice cream van is a mobile and it is not static, and it is not necessary that it is always using the town council's premise. So in that case, how it will work, and will there be any district council involvement also by giving the permission? Because these are the technical questions, I may have to reply to them. So I need to know what I'm saying. So one is that, is there any district council involvement to give the permission? And the roads status that I updated, most of the roads are not yet transferred to town council yet. It is still for the builders. So how the permission thing works. And as Peter said that even in the Papworth, like you send an email to to the parish council, and they said, yeah, okay, good, they get that. I mean, they get the permission to go ahead this streets and that streets. Will that be any other and any sort of similar thing for the Camborne as well or not? Just writing down any email and they get the permission. So these are the few technical questions. If you can reply to me, it will be easy for me to answer someone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bhattacharya. Rachel, if I can put the questions, it was what was South Cam's involvement in the permissions? So if, for example, Councillor Bhattacharya was asked any questions or asked any permissions on it, what's our involvement? In unadopted roads, whose permission would be sought in those circumstances? And will town councils have the same as parish councils in regard to permissions? I believe that's right.
Right, absolutely. With regard to the last question, thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. You're still, people who wish to trade in Camborne will have to approach the town council and say, I wish to trade here, here and here. I appreciate, obviously, pavilions, etc. have been very, very popular for street trading for Camborne. So Camborne may have a different perspective about saying, actually, we're quite happy to trade here. But obviously, a lot of the roads, for example, are not, well, it's old highways, so it's not owned by a particular parish. So the notion will be, we have no objection to trading on these streets. However, please avoid this area because it's very sensitive for X, Y, and Z. So still very much giving the control to the parishes, but of course it's part of the consultation to find out exactly what the parishes want from there. So with regard that, basically though, as far as I can see, and obviously we've got Felicity here as well, who may have a different take or approach on the legal side of it, Felicity, but for me, the highway is the highway. Our district council have approved a street trading policy a couple of years ago that requires all street trading on the highway to be licensed or consented rather. So whoever owns it is almost irrelevant. This is just trying to support the ice cream traders, but obviously in balance with the local needs of the local parishes. It's not a massive change from what we're doing currently, because as Councillor Sanford mentioned, we always consult. When we get an application in for a street trader consent right now, we will ask for the views of ward councillors and parish councillors. So it's a slightly different process, but the end result is exactly the same. The parish either are supportive of trading by this ice cream trader. Admittedly, he's going to be in this position for 15 minutes and then tootle off again. It's a bit different from a static, which might be there for 6 hours a day, but they'll still be asked their views on the application, well, on views on the trading permissions for that consent holder. So it's trying to make sure all sides are taken into account. But I don't think, Felicity, From your view, I've missed anything there, have I, with regards to basically at the council, as we've adopted this policy, we've adopted the legislation which allows us to insist on street trading within our district. Huntingdon, for example, don't have a policy. So you're an ice cream trader, you can just pitch up on the highway and trade as long as you wish, when you wish. So we have more tighter controls here. But I say, from my point of view, is the council have chosen to adopt the legislation which allows us to designate all streets as consent streets. In other words, you need to have a permission from the licensing authority to trade there. So that is where South Cam's involvement has been, in a nutshell, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add to Councillor Bhattacharya's earlier statement about things we might lose. You know, the things from childhood. I thoroughly agree with you. So I'd like to add a little bit of brevity to this situation, because I think this is actually, it's a dark subject this at the moment and very dry. Right, so I'd like to discuss the tunes that ice cream vans play. Now, I'd already broached this with Councillor Howard. He did exactly the same thing there, much quieter. So I quite like Greensleeves. Right? So, and there are other tunes available, but however, there are conditions from childhood, I agree with you, that they have to be slightly out of tune, slightly gravelly, and as they're being played in a bucket somewhere. So if they're too digital or too modern, doesn't rhyme well. Right, and also the stench from the Mr. Whippy when he pulls on the old thing to make the old with his flake, that has to stink as well, which I think you mentioned earlier. But yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed my slightest a bit of input there, but actually it's kind of half serious. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Bradnam.
Just to comment back on some of the things that other councillors have suggested. Back to point 2. Can I suggest we revise the wording to no trading to take place either in the immediate vicinity, within whichever we prefer of those two phrases, of schools during term time added in, unless express permission has been obtained by the school, because that means you wouldn't have to ask their permission when it's not term time. The point that Councillor Bhattacharya made about asking the parishes and the roads not being adopted, I take the point, but I suspect this is to do with what the parish wants to happen, and it's not to do with whether the roads belong to them or not. They have a responsibility for what goes on in the parish. So I think that's why you would go to the parish council, and you don't need to involve. And that kind of neatly takes me on to, I also have a comment on page 11, but I'm happy to wait on that if we want to continue thrashing out these conditions, because. So, Chair, are you happy I move on to that? Okay. So on page 11, we've got 3, which refers to highways consent. And it's to require an applicant to provide written consent from highways for on-street locations with the application. And that to be supplied with the application. Now, I'm a county councillor, and those of us who tried, we know how quick the response is, brackets, not from highways, on all sorts of things to do with highways. So my observation is, if this is not something that is already done, I don't think it's very wise to suggest we do it, because I don't know whether highways have the capacity to respond to questions about, is it okay if I trade from here? And my previous understanding, which I'm quite happy might be wrong, is that it's up to the driver of the van to determine where is a safe place. And I don't know whether highways would be involved or have the capacity even to respond to requests. We might end up somebody having a perfectly legitimate application to be an ice cream trader, and then they might have to wait for months for highways to respond and say, yes, that's fine on outside number 32 on Brook Street, So I just think, I'm not if that isn't something that's done already, I do wonder how realistic it is, because I'm not sure. I think it might delay applications being approved, because I'm not sure highways have the capacity to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. I'll put that to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bradnam. I've just got to remind all to stress that all these changes are not just purely to do with ice cream traders. In fact, this requirement about highways consent excludes the street traders. These are where we've got, say, a lay-by trader, a standard consent, which may be there 4 hours per day, for example. These are the standard consents. So please read that as application requirements not for ice cream traders, because ice cream traders, it would be absolutely impossible, because you're absolutely right, Hannah, there would be no way highways could say, yes, you're okay to go and trade in South Cambs. Because
are these sections on 2, 3, are these not to do with ice cream trade?
these are holistically to do with the whole policy as it stands at the
so
minute.
to do with street trading
Yes,
in general?
so street trading,
Okay,
so you've got the ice cream
okay.
part, is part 1, question 1, sorry, paragraph 1 rather, it's all relating to the proposed new consent of ice cream traders. The rest of these relate to everything else with regard to the policy. So right now what we do is highways are a consultee on street trader applications. Sometimes we don't receive a reply back, and we might have a comment from a local resident to say, this isn't safe, this isn't suitable. As an officer, I'm not there to say a location is suitable. This was actually raised at a licensing committee, I think last year or the year before. So this is very much to get the expert opinion to say, this individual wants to trade his kebab van on this location 5 days a week for 5 hours a day, for example. If it makes that trader have to wait a couple of weeks or a month or so before highways get back and say, yes, it's safe to trade there,
That's fine.
I am not concerned from the local authority point of view. I think it's the right thing to do.
So it's the street traders who have
It's
to,
everyone
and it's
else.
ice cream traders, and that's my understanding
Of course,
going
I
along the
understand that,
street
yes.
and responding to people. Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. So just to clarify, I'm going to move on to now what we're proposing to recommend to the committee. Just to clarify, we've got the amendments for the trading hours to go along with the amended number point 3. For point 2, we're going to add in 50 metres in vicinity of schools and term time only in relation to the consultation with schools. There was the revision for the wording at point 6, which was proposed by Councillor Bradnam. 7 is removed. 9 and 10 were removed due to the amalgamation with 6. So subject to those, and the times, we've had 2 mentions about the times, but I don't know whether the times can be discussed following consultation. As to, at the moment, we leave it as 12 to 7, and then, because we've only had the 2 points, we'll go from the consultation there. Councillor Harris, sorry.
I was hoping you'd add my tunes bit in, Chair.
Yes, and we will put in that as well. Yeah, no, that would be nice if we could insist on that one. Councillor Wilson, did you just have a question in relation to that?
I still have a bit of a problem with referring to term time only, because that would deprive children coming out of school.
We haven't put any times in at the moment. We've just said during school hours, and term time is when you'd be requesting the school's permission.
Okay.
So I would imagine that any issues in relation to specific schools may be picked up there.
No, if we've got school hours in there as well, then that...
Yeah, it says school hours, I think, on one of the later paragraphs. But I think for purposes of consultation, obviously this will come back to us once we've had the consultation feedback as well. So I think that's when we can kind of drill down a little bit more into some of the issues of timings and so on from there. So I am proposing at the moment that we recommend, I'm recommending, sorry, that the committee agree to recommend to the lead cabinet member for environment that officers undertake a consultation on the introduction of a new ice cream traders consent within the council's street trading policy, subject to the amendments proposed and agreed at this meeting. If I could have a... Okay, Councillor Bradnam is proposing and Councillor Rippeth is seconding. Thank you. Is everyone happy with this?
Agreed.
Thank you, that's confirmed, agreed. Thank you very much. Yes, as I've stated with the amendments I've referred to, and that will come through with relation to the consultation. So if we can move on to the next agenda item, which is item 6, the review of the Hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy. So agenda item 6 asks the committee to recommend to the lead Cabinet Member for Environment to approve a revision to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing Policy within section 18G under point 5 to replace the existing wording with by no later than the 1st of December 2030, subject to review in 2027, all licensed Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles must be zero or ultra low emission. This is to recognise South Cambridgeshire District Council's adoption of the Global Climate and Health Emergency Action Plan to deliver zero carbon future for South Cambridgeshire. Rachel, if I can hand over to you for more information on those.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall a workshop session took place in May this year. Members have been provided with a copy of the presentation documents previously. Members agreed at the workshop, in principle, to revise the policy after considering the feedback from the consultation, i.e. from the trade, after hearing from officers. Members were satisfied that there were pressing arguments to support an extension of the policy subject to review in 2027. Note, of course, 2027, we're saying at least by 2027, your committee will always have flexibility to call in the policy at any time if deemed appropriate. But this agreement for the extension was based upon factors such as the current EV charging infrastructure, economic pressures, and licensing implications, in that those drivers not wishing to comply with the new policy could simply relicense elsewhere, yet still maintain their bulk of their business by trading and picking up within our district. The comments from the climate policy team can be found in paragraph 9 on page 16 of this agenda. The committee is now asked to consider confirming the revisions to the policy as per the agenda and your discussions in the May workshop. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to raise now? Councillor Wilson.
I'm just looking at paragraph 3, which suggests that Cambridge City Centre will restrict access from 2028 for ultra-low and zero-emission licensed vehicles only. So how will that affect the drivers licensed under South Cambs or anywhere else for that matter?
Thank you. Rachel Jackson.
Thank you. It's actually quite it's a business need and business demand at the end of the day. It's a bit like when, the congestion charging came in London. It's actually, will people apply or pay a levy, for example? Is there going to be a complete ban? Right now, it's a question of the amount of vehicles that are coming in. Cambridge City have not got a huge amount of licensed private hire vehicles or Hackney carriage vehicles. Wolverhampton, on the other hand, have 18,000 servicing our district, servicing Huntingdon, servicing the city. We see this every day when we get complaints. We obviously got Chelmsford, everyone is coming in and flooding the area. So the question is, right now, we don't generally know, because it may be that everyone will just comply because they can't actually not go into the city. But obviously the feedback you've seen is sometimes some of the trade aren't actually going into the town. There's obviously very different. A lot of people doing airport runs, for example, local pickups in our district. It's very, very different. So it'll be a kind of, if you wish to comply and have access to a city, then you'll have to get an electric vehicle that meets the needs and the requirements. And that's as it stands at the minute, Councillor. I can't really say much more. It's either if you wish to keep going into the city, but for example, is everything else, all the delivery vehicles, etc., are they all going to be able to comply? It's been a very challenging process, as we all know, from what has gone on. A few goalposts have changed in that time, so I don't even think it's still fully confirmed as to what the position is yet. So excuse my ignorance if it has been confirmed, but as I say, for me it just feels like it's been changing an awful lot. But the requirement will be, if you can't trade there, what, for example, is the nightclubs, for example, their dispersal. Because if you've got tons of people living in a nightclub and you've only got 25 vehicles, there'll be a serious problem from there. So it's going to have a massive implication, potentially, is the city proposal right now. So the honest answer is, for our drivers, if they wish then to, because we still have electric vehicles. I can't remember off the top of my head, we have a fleet of a couple of hundred vehicles which are already electric. So people have tried that. So they would then reap the benefits of being able to be accessing the city centre.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Like Councillor Wilson, I'm trying to work out what the implications are. So paragraph 3 says that this is what our current licensing states, that vehicles must be zero or ultra-low emission by 1st of December 2028. And that's what City are doing as well. But if we allow our vehicles not to be zero or low emission, then as of 2028, they won't be able to go into the city anyway. So I'm not quite sure. I quite take the point about Wolverhampton. They may have low zero emission vehicles and they may go into the city. I just don't know what the implication is. I'm trying to work out, because there's the statement that we have very little control and that people would come in from elsewhere. But it's not clear to me whether that would advantage our drivers or disadvantage them. As far as I can see, if the city sticks to December 2028, then private hire vehicles licensed by South Cams won't, unless they're zero or ultra low emission, they won't be able to go into the city anyway. So I'm not quite sure, and in the past, we used to try to sort of work on a similar basis and to similar timings because our vehicles cross the boundary all the time and go through and out the other side into, between the city and South Cams. So I don't want to force us to, comply with something that would be detrimental to our drivers. And indeed, many of the drivers have said, yes, it would be a good idea. I mean, equally, a bigger proportion have said, no, let's delay it until 2030. But I'm just thinking, if we did delay it till 2030 and the city retained their licence policy, their policy as it is, our private hire drivers would not be able to go into the city after the 1st of December 2028. Is that, my understanding is correct? Is that right?
Rachel Jackson, if you could respond.
That's right. Well, as it stands, you have to be electric or zero emission to access City by 2028. This has all been confirmed. This is something very separate from our licensing policy. But I say ultimately that is it. But you say we have a big attraction here is we license Uber. So you could get your license at South Cams and be sat in Birmingham all day waiting for your fare, just the way the legislation from 10 years ago has worked with the cross-border permissions. But as you say, if there isn't a work in the city, then there'll be work elsewhere. It may be further away, it may be all would remain local here, so actually our residents have a better service because we have more availability of our licensed vehicles. But the other concern was if we keep to the 2028 as per the workshop, we sort of discussed this, and then said all vehicles have to be electric. The feedback from the trade has been, actually, I can't afford electric right now because of X, Y, and Z. I'm paying off my current loan on my vehicle. I would just move to another council and then come back into South Cams. So they can do exactly what they're doing. They'll just have a different plate on the vehicle, different licensing authority, and we will have less control because they are not our licensed drivers.
Sorry, but my point was, even if they abandoned us and went and got licensed elsewhere, if their vehicle isn't low emission, they still can't go into the city. And so it wouldn't help them. That's why I couldn't understand why you were saying it, because I thought, well, the only advantage would be is if somehow they were able to go into the city, but I don't think it does it? I think the point they're making is a lot of them are doing long-distance airport runs and I don't know what else, and many of them are concerned about range, but they're also concerned, as we've seen in the comments, about the cost of vehicles and their finance arrangements. But the argument in the paper that they would go to another licensing authority, I don't see that because they still wouldn't be able to work. I mean, I can see it, but it still doesn't get them to work in the city. They still, if the city sticks to this.
You're right, it wouldn't let them go into the city, but then it depends, that's a business decision. That would be for each taxi driver to say, actually, 5% of my business is in the city, I'll stay in South Cams, I just will reject those jobs. And that is a business decision that would be separate for each one. What we're trying to do, I think, with the policy is say, can we be fairer across the board for South Cams? But we are aware that there is this, obviously, relationship with the city. And obviously, as we were saying, with the proposals for the local government review as well, It
Yeah.
depends where our boundaries, our new boundaries
For
will
what
lay as to which ones we will be affiliated with and how that will affect the licensing
But for what
policy.
it's worth, I support this.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. I was just trying to say that there are many, many different things that are in consideration. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Chair. I think some bits have been, you mentioned a couple of bits I was going to say. Basically, at the workshop, I think we worked this through. We'd heard about the local government review. We think of what's going to happen in 2028 when the statutory authority comes along and it has its own licensing committee, etc. They may have a different view, could be a completely different set of councillors, who knows. Legislation may change from government, dates about whether you can buy a petrol car or not may change. The whole thing is up in the air at the moment, and I think the status quo, and I think it's been said here, we have worked together closely with the city, and however those boundaries are going to end up at the unitary authority final picture is to be seen. But at the moment, we have a working relationship with the city that we need to maintain, I believe, and I think as properly. And so I'm very much in the favour of leaving it alone and leaving it at the 28, just because the times are changing. As you say, 27 is the elections, I think, for the unitary authority, give or take, and then we'll start to know what the formulation of how that's going to be. And then 28, they take over from all of us, the different councils. So my thing is just leave it alone.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Rippeth.
Just looking at this sort of more broadly, I mean, obviously, currently, we're South Cambridgeshire District Council and we, still take decisions. We still are the licensing authority. And obviously, when this first was proposed, the world was in a very different sort of scenario. I mean, climate change is still happening, obviously, but no, it was pre-COVID. It was pre the cost of living crisis, and things do change. And the infrastructure that maybe was hoped for at the time just isn't coming anytime soon. So from a taxi driver's point of view, unless they live in their own home, which they own, where they can put in the charger overnight, it does become, very difficult since we still don't have any sort of street lamp charging available in the UK, and it's very difficult to, carry out your business as a taxi driver, I would say, over a longer journey. So I support, kind of regrettably, because it would be better if we could keep it at 2028, but I do, in the bigger picture of things, support it being delayed till 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Rippeth. I'm just going to add my own thoughts here as well. When we had the workshop, we went round and discussed, we had a presentation on the infrastructure, which essentially the conclusion was that as it stands at the moment, there's no guarantee the infrastructure is going to be in place for 2028. When we had the decisions, obviously, as Councillor Hales was saying, we'd found out about the local government review as well, and that's ended up being why we added in the subject to review when we were at the workshop in 2027, because when we come to the position in 2027, hopefully there will be more information on the infrastructure, we will know more about what the government position is moving forward with zero emission vehicles, and we will hopefully know what the position is on our boundaries. When it comes to 2027, I believe, and Councillor Rachel Jackson will confirm this, that we can still say, actually, we want to leave it at 2028. So come 2027, we can say, given that all this information that we now have, we are going to say 2028 and make that clear to the vehicle owners. So for me personally, I think that given how we are in the air at the moment, moving it to 2030 still keeps it within our green to the core standards that we'd like to maintain, but also brings in helping businesses within South Cambridgeshire, which is important. As the consultation shows, there is difficulty with financing, there's difficulty with the cost of living, people are purchasing vehicles. If we do this now and say, you've got another 2 years, but be aware that in 2028 it may still happen, I think it gives a little bit more certainty to the owners of these vehicles and these companies, so that it just gives a bit more breathing space in relation to the balancing of these two cores. That's just my opinion. And the next person is Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I also wanted to kind of put the view of the drivers and the operators, because we did have a very thorough workshop. You know, we can see the comments are extensive, and good for them for all contributing their thoughts on it. And, you know, part of the business of licensing is to enable business. You know, we are in the interests of supporting businesses locally. And I think, you know, we've always had very positive engagement from the private hire and hackney carriage operators and drivers. And I just think we ought to actually reflect the fact that, you know, as we've said, things have changed. They've made reasonable representations, and I think in this case we need to show that we've listened to them, and we are going to, you know, do the thing that we said we would do, which was, after the discussion, the workshop agreed to seek views on the following revision, which was by no later than 1st of December 2030, subject to review in 2027. And I think that is fair and reasonable, and they would feel we were being fair and reasonable with them, having put all their time into the workshop. I think we should. So I support the proposal to change to 2030.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. The other thing that's changed, possibly even since our workshop, but certainly in the last year, is that Mr. Elon Musk has pretty much destroyed the marketplace for electric cars. I believe sales of Teslas are down 50–60% across Europe. There's a lot of discussion I'm seeing online about, is electric cars still the way to go in future, or should we be looking at hybrid? Should we be looking at sustainable fuels? So rather than nail our drivers to a technology that may die in a couple of years, I would also support deferring and coming back in 2 years and reviewing the situation.
Thank you. Councillor Hales.
Well, here we go. I have just recently purchased myself a car, electric car, and I decided that I was going to take it for a little hike to Edinburgh. So that was going to fill me with the ultimate dread of anxiety and all the rest of the range. Couldn't have been further from the truth, actually. It was a pretty good run up to Durham, charged up, no problem, back up in Edinburgh, had the fringe, had 1 or 2 gin and tonics, came home when I was allowed to drive, and had 1 or 2 issues of some chargers not working, which I think is standard across the country, right? But the plethora of charging stations, which I was really surprised about, actually, including McDonald's, would you believe, right? McDonald's have got probably the best set of chargers I've ever come across out of my entire 9 months of owning this car. Simple to use and pretty reasonable in price. Not that I'm advertising for McDonald's, you understand? I'm not allowed. However, it just want to make that point. I think this is probably, in contrary to what Councillor Sanders said, I think this is probably the way forward. Our hydrogen industry will cost too much. I have a nephew who works in that industry. He said it will never happen for cars. It will cost far too much to do it. But that aside, I think this is the way forward. Whether we have batteries made out of salt from China, I think we see on Facebook now, it's a bit of a laugh, but there you go. Who knows? But I think this is the way forward. And as people have said, 2030 gives a breathing space for whoever comes next to be able to set the policy according to national and world policy there. And there are other cars other than Tesla, much better as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. I do agree. We have an electric car and we have done the journeys. But when we were having the feedback in the workshop, obviously it was the South Cambs infrastructure that was discussed more. And I think giving that a little bit of extra time just to get the South Cambs infrastructure in place and review the position then, for me personally, much like you, I think electric will be the way forward. I love my electric car for my journeys that I do in it. So yeah, we'll see. Does anyone else have any other comments before I draw this matter to a close? Councillor Bhattacharya.
I have a very small comments. I work with the taxi drivers time to time I am just helping them to grow and make a recreation club in the evening hours in my charity centers. And I found they get difficulties to even filling up a simple form. Just a simple form, which is very clear, because most of them are not English speaker and they get totally confused. I just ask them to book the room hire form. They also look blanked. So my request is that if you, and this whole business is a very complicated form, sometimes they need to fill, to give them some guidance and help and care and passion. Believe me, they are also confused to fill up the very simple forms.
Thank you, Councillor Bhattacharya. I believe Rachel will comment on any assistance that will be given for that one, and then I'll draw this matter to a close.
Thank you. So in general, we have spent, well, the last several, I can say probably 2 years now, I think it's been looking at reviewing our application forms, our application processes. That's been bringing it all online to the self-serve process or digitalisation. And we now have lots of little help chats over these documents that will say, is your vehicle right-hand drive, etc., etc. However, the nature of the role requires an applicant to have a good command of the English language. You could be conveying a passenger who is vulnerable, intoxicated, for example, and not being able to understand that person. It's not just us saying this is best practice guidance. So you'll see some councils requiring a driver to provide a GCSE in English language. We haven't gone that far. We've done a basic assessment well, it's not basic, I'm saying this rather, I think it's wrong. They have to now do a safeguarding course, but this has to be in a classroom environment before we allow them to do a safeguarding disability awareness online. You agreed as members, no, this should be a classroom face-to-face environment. It can still be online, and then the course facilitator is speaking, and they'll come back to me and say, actually, Mr. X was just nodding all the time and not answering any questions. So we haven't let him pass his test because we need to be sure that they have a good command of English language. And obviously we have a couple of applicants. I think one is a scrap metal dealer who will come in, and there's actually another street trade who will actually come in because he is computer illiterate. So we can't expect everything, but I think the questions we ask are the standard, which is plain English, because our whole website review, and I think the age limit was 7, I think, reading age limit of 7. That's how our documents and web pages have to be designed now. So you have a reading age of 7 or 8. It's very, very low. My argument was you have to be at least 18 or 21 to apply for these licenses, but I was told to be quiet. It is basically, this is a reading age. I said it's a legal document. I have lots of backs and forth, but basically we do support the drivers. The help is available to people. We obviously help them because we've got about 2,500 drivers, so something is obviously not that difficult because we're getting more and more, we're not getting less and less applicants coming through. But I think we're basically, it's a safeguarding responsibility to the public. We've got to make sure the driver is fit and proper, and that includes being able to convey and converse in the English language. Understand basic instructions, because not everybody uses an app to vote. Some people still use a telephone and expect to be taken to Little Simpson, daycare, for example, and if the driver looks blankly at them, that is a real concern for us as well, because I don't believe they're fit and proper. But I say the forms are long because it's all about ensuring the safety and well-being of our residents and the service users. We've got to capture everything in there, but also they can't be using their lack of command of the English language as an excuse to say, I didn't understand, I didn't know it. And Councillor Bramley in particular was one of our long-standing committee members, to say, I didn't know I had to put my convictions for, armed robbery 2 years ago, because they didn't say that. It's sometimes used as an excuse, but in the long shot, if people genuinely are needing assistance, we'll help them. They can come in, and we've helped people before, but we can't obviously handle everyone through that process, although sometimes I feel we do. But I say, with basically our online forms now, a lot more help text to hover over this to say, this is, what do we exactly mean by, what make is your vehicle, what's your driver number, etc. So there's a lot more help text than there has been before, but we're constantly reviewing, and constantly enhancing the form to make sure it is fit for purpose. A bit like your policies. We constantly review them and bring them in to review at any time we need to.
Thank you.
I will say a follow-up question. Yeah, I'm sorry if I emphasize only on the English. No, it is not only English. Most of them are also the graduate. They have the university degrees. It is not, English is one thing. It is not exactly the English. It has also a cultural thing. They get confused with the forms in terms of how to fill it up, because I have seen them, because I'm actually working with them in certain other aspects. If there is a template, given, they might be it might be easier for them to, oh, this is the answer, I am supposed to fill it up this way. It might give them a easier way of filling up the forms. They get confused because I have given them one form to fill up and 5 people are looking at the form and they are discussing for a long time. I found that a very complicated form might be difficult for them. So I know the district council we are trying to give them lots of support and help. In short, you can give them a template or you can help them.
Councillor
This is the way you should
we
fill
have
it up.
discussed at a previous committee meeting that if there are any specific issues that come up to raise with it, and we have offered to have
So I'm
translators
saying
and so on. So if there are any
practical.
specific issues, if you can relay to
Sure.
Rachel
So this
Jackson
is the thing
separately, that'd be great.
I'm actually seeing this all the time, so that's why I just come.
No, that's fine. But yeah, if you can relay those separately, hopefully we can address those outside of the committee meeting. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I actually support Councillor Bhattacharya's suggestion that we provide a template form already filled out as a dummy, just so that people can see what sort of answer we're expecting in what sort of box. But I also wanted to point out, this consultation, I want to congratulate the licensing staff, because 2,358 people were surveyed with a response rate of 514, which is 22%. Everybody should realise that 22% response on any kind of consultation, which was done online, also online. In other words, people were able to do this from their phones or their laptops or whatever. This is an excellent response rate. This is an excellent representation of the views of our private hire drivers and hackney carriage drivers. So I just wanted to congratulate the officers on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Thank you. And I also congratulate the licensing authority. Thank you. So now we come to the options we have. So the committee may agree one of the following options, recommending that the lead cabinet member for the environmental services and licensing approve the policy revision, or that we reject it. I would recommend that the committee agree to recommend to the lead cabinet member for the environment that they approve the revision to the hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy within section 18G under point 5 and replace the existing wording with by no later than the 1st of December 2030, subject to a review in 2027, all licensed hackney carriage and private hire vehicles must be zero or ultra low emission. This is to recognise South Cambridgeshire District Council's adoption of the Global Climate and Health Emergency Action Plan to deliver a zero carbon future for South Cambridgeshire. I would have a proposer. Councillor Bradnam and seconder, Councillor Hales. And if we can, does everyone agree?
Agreed.
Any against? Any abstentions? No, thank you very much, that's agreed. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to thank the committee members for attending the meeting today and thank anyone who attended online. This now brings the meeting to a close, and please can the meeting producer now end the live stream. Thank you very much, everyone.